And welcome to Centex Multimedia live streaming for the 2nd of February. Well, 2nd of February already, yes, it is wonderful to see that it's 2nd of February already and it's raining. It's raining in Brisbane, but I mean, look, hey, we did need the rain. We've got some excellent news that a Brisbane company has won a big contract to supply the medicine and home testing thing to USA, and that is wonderful that they have won that contract, and we will bring to you that news too in a minute. So, it is very good to see that our companies here, our local companies are doing very well. And of course, we will look at the situation in Myanmar as well, the developing situation in Myanmar. And of course, we will also look at the budget that's been presented, handed down in India as well. So that news that I was talking about was the Brisbane company, Illume. And it has won a $303 million contract to supply COVID-19 home testing kits to United States. That's fantastic news for local manufacturer that's rolling up its sleeve to fight the global pandemic and employing hundreds of Queenslanders to do so. So in a Queensland government size, we are supporting Illuminum through our essential goods and supply chain program announced in May 2020, allowing the company to expand manufacturing to its facility in Richlands. The company currently employs more than 300 people and will almost double that as demand increase in the coming months. So when you look at that, a company which is based here is going to be providing home testing supplies worth $303 million. So a lot of people are asking, why are we not using these in Queensland when they're made right here? There is currently no approval to market or sell them under the federal government legislation in Australia. So the red tape comes in. Also, Queensland's Chief Health Officer, Dr. Jeanette Young, explains it's an appropriate device to use in countries who are struggling to keep on top of COVID spread. It's a fantastic piece of work. She did not comment on why it's not actually being used right here. And the Premier says that she absolutely commends those people who have developed these tests, and you use them when you have got a lot of cases and you want to try and pick up the majority, whereas I want to pick up every single case. I want to pick up on the first case in a cluster, not the 20th or the 30th. So that's the difference, and that's why it's not being used in Queensland, according to the Premier. And also, we've got the capacity. Our pathology labs can do all the tests through the usual process, so we don't need it. But for other countries, that's very, very appropriate. A country like US, a big country like that, and here we are from Queensland, who are going to be supplying home testing kits. So that's well done, alumni, and it's a wonderful news to see that. Well, right now, let's, before we move on to the rest of the news, let's take a very quick look at what's happening with the weather. With that, let's welcome Dilraj.
Good morning, everyone. Weather forecast for the rest of today is maximum 28 degrees. Brisbane area is cloudy with very high chance of showers. There is chance of thunderstorm. Winds east to northeasterly 15 to 20 km per hour, becoming light in the evening. Fire danger is low to moderate. Sun protection is recommended till 4 p.m. and UV index is predicted to reach 13, that is extreme. Till tomorrow, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dilraj, for that update. And of course, we know that we're talking about the rain. We know that Fiji has had more than its fair share of rain happening lately. So let's take a very quick look at what is happening right there.
Fears of disease outbreak in Thai level. Bono level faces major transportation disruption, and people start to pick up the pieces in Ra.
From the studios of FBC Suva.
News by the courtesy of
The
FBC.
risk for leptospirosis, dengue fever and typhoid outbreak is high for most villages along the Wainimbuka River. Turanganikoro of Welutua No. 1 village, Isua Natambalake, says the village has recorded few cases of typhoid following disasters in the past. He is working closely with its community health workers to ensure no outbreak of such diseases post-tropical cyclone Ana. Jose Nanunga was in Wainimbuka yesterday and files their story.
This was the scene at Wailutua Nabando village yesterday. Disaster first responders and youth alike clearing the mess caused by the severe flooding.
We have started with our cleanup activity since this morning when the water level at the Wainimbuka River receded.
Turanganikoro Isoana Tambaleka says his concern now is the safety of villages and to ensure there is no outbreak of communicable diseases that normally emerge after a disaster.
I have been advising all villagers to boil their drinking water. They need to remain indoors, otherwise wear protective gears when out in the fields or cleaning their houses.
Village elder Etonia Rokorombe says the safety and welfare of villagers with disability also needs to be prioritized in times of disaster.
Our safety should not be compromised. Villagers to place our safety and health paramount. But I'm thankful that is one thing villagers did first when the water rises rapidly, by moving us safely to higher grounds.
Those are the 5 houses that were used as evacuation centers to accommodate over 120 Wailutua villages when the floodwaters entered the village yesterday morning. Without taking any risk, the Turanganikoro has advised all evacuees to remain in those centers once a green light is given by relevant authorities. Jose Nanunga, FBC News.
Road access between Lambasa, Savu-Savu and Nambo Walu has been cut off by numerous landslides on the main service route. The network connects the 3 main centers in Banua level but is closed to all vehicles, leaving no other means of travel by road. The route is used by people traveling by ferry to and from Banua level via Nambo Walu. It is also used to transport goods from Viti level. There are underslips at Korosomo Hill, passing lane on Nambo Walu Road between Lambasa and Senganga, Loma slip on Transinsular Road, Makomako slip on Nambo Walu Road Tambia, Transinsular Road before Wunibesi Bridge and Somo Senganga on Nambo Walu Road also have underslips. Most Fijians in the Ra province have reached quickly to rebuild and rehabilitate after the passing of tropical cyclone Ana. Villagers were seen using whatever resources they have to sustain them while waiting for assistance from relevant organizations and the government. Nalalawa villager Eldela Irorevi Wangakede says about 5 houses were submerged during the floods over the weekend with household belongings as well as farms.
The Wainimbuka River rose rapidly in the early hours of Saturday. I told the villagers not to worry about the belongings and just to move to evacuation centers as life is more precious.
More than 300 people in the Waindamundamu settlement in Nosori were stranded for almost 4 days due to severe flooding. Residents say their daily routine came to a halt from Friday when rain and flooding started. These residents were stranded inside their homes and were unable to go to work. Many of these residents who escaped to the evacuation centers are waiting for flood waters to recede before they can begin their cleanup.
Water level has reached to the height of my knees. All our belongings are wet and damaged.
See the people how they cross there. Very hard to come out from their house.
This is the first time we have experienced a flood like this. Many people have gone to the evacuation centers with the help of the police.
Restoring power supply in the Northern Division will take up to 3 weeks as Energy Fiji Limited is carrying out damage assessments. Chief Executive Hasmukh Patel says they've restored supply to 75% of Suva and the rest will take about a week. He adds for the Lambasa areas there has been no restoration as yet. Savu-Savu has 10% and Taviuni has 9% restoration. He says within the next week or 2 a decision will be made if they need to send more personnel to Lambasa. Assessment is also underway in Viti level.
So all I'm saying is the damages are there and it's going to take a little time. But as I said, majority of the area should be back within a week. Then some other areas deeper inside rural, probably 2 to 3 weeks, and way up in the hills it could take even up to 3 to 4 weeks.
Villages.
The news from Fiji, we've been keeping an eye for the last couple of days and bringing you updates on what's actually happening there, because it is of a lot of interest to our community. So it is good to keep an eye, and of course, no doubt some relief efforts would be organized or mobilized. The troops would be mobilized from here as well, from Brisbane, as Brisbane residents always come forward when something like this happens there, and they all come forward to help and to assist. Well, right now, moving on, let's take a very quick look at what else is happening, and of course we know that the trouble in Myanmar.
Myanmar's military moved in before dawn with coordinated raids in cities and regions. Their main target was the country's leader Aung San Suu Kyi, followed by other senior government figures. Rumours of a post-election coup had been brewing for days, and as soldiers took to the streets around Myanmar's major cities, the military confirmed it would seize power for the next 12 months.
In order to scrutinise the voter lists, the nation's governance is handed over to the Commander-in-Chief.
The army had warned it would take action if its concerns about fraud during last November's election weren't addressed. Myanmar's Electoral Commission said the poll was free and fair. Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy party won in a landslide with 83% of the vote.
Myanmar has literally only come out of 50 years of military rule 10 years ago, and it's just a reminder of how fragile its democracy really is.
For now, no one knows where Aung San Suu Kyi and her colleagues are being held and what condition they're in. But in a statement, she's urged her supporters to wholeheartedly protest. Myanmar's people have begun panic buying essentials and withdrawing cash as they wait nervously to find out what happens next. Banks and airports have closed, communications are down.
People have deep-seated fears of the military, and there are strong fears of Myanmar going back to what it was prior to 2011.
Australia's called on Myanmar's military to respect the rule of law and immediately release the detained leaders. Today was supposed to be the first sitting day of the new parliament. Instead, democracy is in tatters as the military reasserts its grip on power. Mazoe Ford, ABC.
And that's the news coming from Myanmar, the Myanmar coup. As we know that there is lots of talks about all the support for the overthrown leader, and she has, of course, urged people to protest against that. But anyway, it still remains to be seen to see what really happens. Well, right now, let's join the Prime Minister with his press conference of yesterday.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia and today's Westpac address. My name's Laura Tingle. I'm the new club president, and I'm also the chief political correspondent for 7:30. Federal Parliament resumes tomorrow, so it's appropriate that our first guest of the year is the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who's been a regular speaker here with various ministerial hats on and as Prime Minister. Before we hear from him today, I just mentioned that we are starting the year with a bang, hosting not just the PM this week, but also on Wednesday, Reserve Bank Governor Phil Lowe. If you are following the conversation online, you can find us on Twitter. Our user handle is @PressClubAust and our hashtag is NPC. Everyone, please welcome the Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Laura, and to everybody who's here today. Can I, of course, begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, their elders past and present, and the future. Can I also acknowledge any veterans who are with us today, serving men and women of our Australian Defence Forces, and say to them, thank you for your service. Can I also acknowledge today the beautiful Abdullah and Saka families on this first National I Forgive Day, as we remember their four beautiful angels, Anthony, Angelique, Sienna and Veronique, who were taken from us this day a year ago. I also welcome the very many of our colleagues, my colleagues who are here today, of course led by the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. It's great to have you all here today, and I acknowledge you all and the great job you've been doing, and I know you will do over the course of this year. In 2020, I said we would not let this virus break our Australian spirit. It hasn't, and it won't. I said we always believed ourselves as Australians to be a strong people, but we were about to find out just how strong we really were. And we did. We found, our generation, the same strength, good humour, resilience and mateship that enabled past generations to rise to the challenges of their time. Today, Australia stands out across the world in response to the pandemic. We continue to report zero or negligible cases in community transmission. We have mercifully so far avoided a third wave over this summer. We have the third lowest mortality rate from the pandemic amongst G20 nations, and our record on saving lives is matched, importantly, by our record in saving livelihoods, where we have outperformed economically the world's most advanced economies. With more than 90% of the jobs lost already back, our comeback has not just begun, it's gathering pace. As Chris Richardson from Deloitte Access Economics observed earlier this month, you'd rather be here than almost anywhere else. Now, that's my default setting, I've got to say, regardless of the circumstances. I'm sure it is for most Australians. It's very true now. There is still much more to do, though. The pandemic is still raging. It's not petering out. The virus hasn't gone anywhere. Indeed, it's morphing into new and more virulent strains. So we must remain vigilant. We have all learned a lot over the past 12 months, and we have also led the way in so many areas. We must take these lessons into 2021 and continue to make our own way through this crisis, our Australian way, that respects our liberal democratic values, our expert institutions, our business-led market economy, and the responsibilities and accountabilities of our federal system. An Australian way where our decisions to protect public health are guided by our respect for science and expert medical advice. I acknowledge Brendan Murphy, who's here amongst us today. An economic response that's driven, as the Treasurer and I outlined, by clear principles to navigate uncertainty. A response that is proportionate, timely, scalable.
So that's the press conference that we attended yesterday, but of course virtually online, and our colleagues were fortunate enough to be there in person. Well, now we'll just take a quick look at few of the key points on that, and one is that there is no extension of JobKeeper.
2021 under COVID now has its own political slogan, fit for a possible election year.
Stronger, safer and together on the other side.
Scott Morrison distilling the challenge, ensuring economic recovery through mass vaccination of the population.
Now, this will be one of the largest logistics exercises ever seen in Australia.
More than 25 million Australians to receive free jabs, starting with the frail and vulnerable later this month. Nationwide inoculation boosted by a near $2 billion top-up to the vaccine budget.
This will ensure we get the vaccine to all Australians, including people in rural, remote and very remote areas.
All while weaning the economy off government support. The PM reaffirming the JobKeeper wage subsidy will expire at the end of March as planned.
We are not running a blank cheque budget.
In places like Cairns and elsewhere, it will mean small businesses hit the fence and workers lose their jobs.
But businesses that receive JobKeeper only to later chalk up tens of millions in profits paid out in dividends and executive bonuses won't be asked to repay.
I'm not into the politics of envy, Mark. I leave that to my opponents.
This is a government that has its priorities all wrong.
The economic recovery is wholly dependent on a successful vaccine rollout. And this will be Scott Morrison's near obsession for the next 9 months. Because if he's to call an election for later this year, it'll be on the rollout that he'll be judged. The PM's indicating little patience for frolics on other policy fronts, but today he did shift his language significantly on a prickly issue inside the coalition, climate change.
Our goal is to reach net zero emissions as soon as possible, and preferably by 2050.
If he wants to commit to net zero emissions, he should just say so.
We'll see how that goes.
That might eventually happen, in spite of some in the coalition party room. Andrew Probyn, ABC.
Of course, there is always the two sides of the politics. So if we are aiming for that, zero emission by 20, what other things we're going to do? What's going to happen to our coal? Let's find out.
Another year, another cluster for energy policy, with still no commitment from the government to move to net zero by 2050 and a long-running stoush in the Labor Party forcing a reshuffle. Business is left wanting again. In communities that rely on fossil fuels, people are grappling with the issue of how to reinvent their economies. In Australia's major thermal coal region, about 14,000 people work in mines and more than 600 in power stations. This week on The Business, we investigate how the area of the Hunter Valley is transforming itself for a future beyond the Black Rock. Stephen Long reports from the New South Wales region.
A ship wends its way into Newcastle Harbour, home to the biggest coal port in the world.
That is about 179 million tonnes of capacity per year.
From the port to the mines and the power stations that burn the Black Rock, coal has been integral to the Hunter Valley. But as Australia's major export markets shift to clean energy, the thermal coal industry is in retreat. Coal-fired power too, with Liddell Power Station in the Upper Hunter Valley due to close in 2023, nearby Bayswater in 2035. Gerard Spinks and Carl Kerwin have spent decades in the power industry. Thanks, fellas. You heard I was thirsty. At a pub in the valley, they talk about their fears for a region reliant on coal.
All our other main industries are gone. Our steel, shipbuilding, rail, textiles, that's all gone. So all we've got left is mining and power, and once that goes, we've got no idea what the future holds.
So I guess for workers your age,
so, that is what's worrying the people there is their employment as well. Of course, we've got to balance the equation with making sure that the environment is looked after. Now, when we talk about coal, many people just look at the energy and when the coal's banned to create energy. But people many times forget that coal is used for so many other things. We drive on beautiful roads, on neat, sealed road. What is that road sealed with? It's tar seal. Where does the tar come from? The tar comes from coal. And how, if you just realize how much coal is there on those roads as well, so many things like that. There are many other, the industries, other things that rely on coal. It's not only just banning the coal for fuel, but there's many other uses as well, many recycled uses as well. So I think it's a big dialogue. It's an ongoing dialogue. We'll see what happens with that.
GlobeNet Realty. GlobeNet Realty has been the longest established, trusted and respected agency in its trade area. Washa Chandra, Director of GlobeNet Realty, provides honest and ethical service to her customers. If you are thinking of investing in Brisbane real estate market, or if you are seeking professional property management, then you should contact Usha Chandra today on landline 3865 4466 or mobile 0419 775 416. And for further updates, log on to our website www.globenetralty.com.au. GlobeNet Realty is your own local real estate agency. Situated at Shop 52281 Sandgate Road, Boondall. GlobeNet Realty. Real estate is our world.
And real estate is the world. And don't forget that tomorrow with the latest property trends, Usha Chandra presents the weekly real estate update right here from this very studios. Well, right now we go to the other side of the world, and everyone's been keeping an eye on India. And of course, there are troubled times. The farmers' dispute has not been settled, and it seems to be intensifying. And there have been lockdowns, and there have been internet that has been cut in the area. All sorts of things happening, and even this much, 60 plus days now. But even then, no resolution has been reached. So there has been no agreement so far, and the tussle still continues. And amongst all that, the union budget had to be delivered. So let's take a look at what's in the budget for India.
The Narendra Modi government has bitten the bullet. Often criticized for not taking fiscal risks, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has left prudence for some time later.
Fiscal deficit in RE 2020 to 2021 is pegged at 9.5% of GDP. The fiscal deficit in BE 21-22 is estimated to be 6.8% of the GDP. The gross borrowing from the market for the next year would be around 12 lakh crores.
The biggest jump in allocation comes in healthcare, with 35,000 crore rupees allocated to coronavirus vaccinations.
So the budget outlay for health and well-being is 2,23,846 crores in this BE 21-22, as against the BE of only 94,452 crores, and it marks an increase of 137%.
If you're wondering about those thumping noise, that's the members thumping on the table, as you can see there.
Is a tightrope walk. The big news, it has left tax slabs untouched, contrary to fears of higher taxation in some slabs. But it has made PF contributions above 2.5 lakh rupees taxable. On the reforms front, it proposes to hike foreign investment in insurance from 49% to 74%. Privatize 2 public sector banks and a general insurance company. The government wants to launch the LIC IPO in the coming fiscal. The government also hopes to raise funds by selling land. The proposal to set up bad assets bank to buy the NPAs of banks brought cheers to banking stocks. The innovative idea in the budget, one-person companies will be allowed. This, in addition to the extension of tax holiday for startups, can provide a post-pandemic incentive.
The benefits that have been extended to startups in motivating, facilitating so that India as a country may prosper through entrepreneurial institutionalization is phenomenal.
The government has its hands tied. It has not made any big changes in allocations for welfare schemes. Now, it will wait to see if its bold move to borrow will pay off and lift the growth. Bureau Report, India.
So there you go, the budget that's been done. And right now on social media, everyone's become an expert and everyone's analyzing the budget as is expected, and we'll see how it goes. And all this is happening amongst all that protest and the ongoing negotiation, which has not reached any conclusion as yet. Well, right now it's time to look at some of the functions and events happening right here in our sunny Brisbane. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the news for today. But right now, breaking news, something that just has come in our studios right now. The quarantine in Western Australia. Let's take a look at that news.
After nearly 10 months without community transmission of COVID-19, more than 2 million West Australians are now staying indoors under a snap 5-day lockdown imposed by the state government.
But if we can all work together and do the right thing over the next few days, we will increase our chances of crushing the virus once again.
I certainly think rapid action at a time like this is warranted. What we don't want is a whole train of infection to be set off in the community.
All eyes are on this quarantine hotel after a security guard in his 20s contracted the more contagious UK strain of the virus.
We will leave no stone unturned to ensure we find out exactly what happened to prevent it from happening again.
A police investigation into the breach is ongoing, with some experts claiming it was inevitable.
There is a degree of arrogance in the way we've approached this because our borders have been so successful, because very few people have come into the state. We thought we were invulnerable. Well, we're no different to anywhere else.
More than 60 close contacts have been identified. The guard also worked as a rideshare driver, but police say there is no evidence he did so while infected.
We can't lock people up who work in hotel quarantine. They can still go out there and do all that. A second job is of
Just the incoming news is Premier's come on live, so we'll cross over to the Queensland.
And constantly improving, that's what we've been doing and that's what we'll continue to do.
Does the government support a national summit?
That would be a matter for the relevant ministers to consider, but I imagine that we would be happy to participate in something like that if there was interest from other states.
The government has looked in the past at car engine mobilisers. Is that an idea that you would revisit?
Oh, look, I think that's certainly something that needs to be considered. I think the technology needs to be constantly monitored, and when it's at a point where it is viable, where it's feasible, we should consider it, yes.
What about if it was being forced to wear ankle bracelets?
Oh, look, I think there are, again, a lot of issues associated with that would need to be taken into account, but if people want to bring ideas forward, we'll consider them.
Mr. Lever's made some comments about juvenile offenders being predominantly Indigenous. What's your response to that?
Well, I think that highlights how we can't view any of these problems through the prism of one single policy area. Like, this isn't just a question about how courts deal with bail. These are questions of intergenerational disadvantage and the impact that that's had on sections of our community, and all of those things need to be taken into account. So we need to look at the child safety system, the juvenile justice system, the education system, the health system, in fact everything that we do in our community, rather than just focus in on these individual crunch points by themselves.
So do you agree the government needs to do more work in all of those areas?
I don't think anyone would argue that we have closed the gap or fully addressed questions of Indigenous disadvantage. So no, of course there is always more to do, and we're always working at it.
And on Youth Justice last week, the Premier said that she wants to know why the courts let the young man in the Alexandra Hills case out of remand. Now, is it not correct that the courts enforce legislation which the Premier signs off on?
Well, no, the Parliament passes legislation, but what the Premier was indicating there was that we cannot go into the details of these individual cases, and that in that case she wanted to know what matters were considered. We obviously are able to have some of that information, but we're not able always to disclose it all publicly, and that makes it very difficult to discuss individual cases.
And the courts enforce legislation which she understands and signs off on. So for her to say that she wants answers as to why a court let him out, do you understand that that is confusing to some people?
Well, no, I think people understand that when courts consider matters, they have a wide range of matters that they have to take into account. And all the Premier was saying was that she wanted to understand how the courts reached that conclusion.
They're legally bound by the legislation. So
Oh yeah, but every case before them has different facts, and they are the facts that that court considers. So they apply the legislation to a set of facts, and her remarks simply went to how those facts had been considered in that circumstance, what the facts of that case were.
with regards to the legislation though, if the buck doesn't stop with the Premier, who does it stop with?
Well, in this case, the courts make a decision based on the law and the facts of the case.
About vacancy rates here on the Gold Coast, extremely low, less than 1% at the moment. Do you think that the housing supply here is adequate to support the growing population here on the Gold Coast?
Look, housing supply is largely a matter for the Gold Coast City Council, although of course we work with them to ensure that there is sufficient land supply. We released a report late last year which indicated that there was sufficient supply on the Gold Coast. We are seeing a surge in migration to Queensland, and that is having an impact on prices and availability, and that's something we'll need to very closely monitor going forward.
Would the government consider spending more than the $63 million that allocated to social housing as outlined in the last budget?
So we're in the middle of a massive surge, a massive increase in social housing, the biggest increase since the Second World War. That takes time to ramp up, but it's underway right now.
So you would consider spending more?
We're certainly intending to spend more. Yes.
You mentioned the Loom earlier. Congratulate them for their US stuff. The government spent some money supporting them to get that up and running, but given now they've sold the product to the US, they haven't even applied to have it used in Australia. Do you think it was money well spent?
Yes, very much so. This is a company, an initiative creating jobs here in Queensland right now. There are Queenslanders working at a loom who wouldn't be there if it weren't for that ingenuity, that product, and our support for them. This is something we should all be very, very proud about. The fact that a Queensland product is the fact that the United States has turned to a Queensland product to be a key weapon in their attempts to control COVID-19.
But in allocating taxpayer money, did you envisage at the time that the product would be mainly used overseas?
Yeah, this has always been a product that would have most application in places where they were struggling with a massive outbreak. We are very fortunate not to have that here, and so we can rely on other technologies. So we don't need that product right now. Maybe down the track that'll change, and maybe down the track that our TGA will consider a testing kit like this one. It's been given emergency approval in the US because of just how drastic their circumstances are, and I understand that the company currently envisages that they will only be able to service that market, such the demand is so strong.
We're hearing that Loom is planning to build or run a factory over in the US. What happens to those jobs that were sprouting here in Queensland back in December?
So they'll continue to manufacture here in Queensland, as well as at the new facility they plan to build in the United States. So it's a massive expansion for them, but their headquarters and their Brisbane-based manufacturing staff will remain here and will continue to manufacture and export products.
So you still believe it's money well spent?
Oh, very much so. I was very pleased to help them ship their first set of these tests, and that's obviously been so successful. Now they've got this massive new order.
What do you say to critics who say, look, it's a bit rich for the Queensland government to be appealing for an extension of JobKeeper when tourism operators are suffering as a result of your government's border closures?
Well, no, they're suffering as a result of a global pandemic. We didn't invent this pandemic. We have been working to get it under control, but the international border restrictions were put in place by the Morrison government. Of course, we support them. They've been very, very useful in controlling the virus. But the national government has to take ongoing responsibility for supporting jobs and industries throughout that, as are we. We're doing our part, and so should they.
Do you have any update on the report or investigation to the hotel quarantine we were told last week that would be released last week?
No, I'm not sure where that's at, but I'm happy to find out for you.
Sorry, just quickly back on the loom. Did you have any guarantees from the company that it won't ship those jobs overseas?
They're very, very proud Queenslanders. I don't think they've got any intention of moving overseas, but they are expanding just so rapidly that part of their deal with the US is to put some of their growth in manufacturing on site in the US, and I think that makes sense.
But is that just verbal?
So there you go. That's the update, and of course, as the Deputy Premier mentioned, that their operations might shift to US, not totally, but maybe part of it. But it now is upon the government here to make sure that the company is looked after, so that they keep their operations here in Queensland and keep operating under the way. And he's of course talked about the port, and that live report is coming from the Spit and Gold Coast. And of course there's always two sides of the commentary, people for and against. Well, right now, before I let you all go, I just want to talk to you all about Gopio's fundraising dinner for India Day Fair. Of course, we know that India Day Fair every year costs a lot to host. And this year would be now different. It will be on the 15th of August actually, and which is a Sunday. But the costs are enormous to put forward, and of course under these extreme times, with the lack of sponsors and grants, we have to reach out to the community for fundraising. So the fundraising is on the 19th of February. 6:30 p.m. at Michael's Oriental. So if you haven't booked your tickets, please jump online. Do search us on Eventbrite, and the tickets are available there. And of course, we're getting good support from a lot of politicians. We really appreciate their support, and we'd like to, welcome you there as well. So if you haven't booked your ticket, please do so. Come ahead to support us. Put forward India Day Fair 2021. Well, right now, it's goodbye from me until tomorrow. It's been wonderful having your company, and it's wet weather, so if you're out on the roads, please do take a lot of precaution. Don't follow too closely because it takes a lot of time. It takes longer to, park your car or brake, especially in rainy conditions, and it's not the same as when you're not driving in the rain. So please, take those precautions. Don't forget your brolly. Make sure you've got that with you when you go out, and I'll see you all tomorrow. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. It's wonderful to see you always.